evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the Demons missed a golden opportunity to cement a spot in the top four heading into the bye. After a season that many predicted would be one of rebuilding, the Demons still head into the break firmly in the finals mix with a 9-6 record and plenty left to play for. I'm unable to host tonight due to a prior engagement, but my co-host will ably fiddle in tonight. I'll also be away for the Dees' next two matches after the bye, but B-Man and George will be holding down the fort. I will return for the North Melbourne game refreshed and ready for the run home and that finals tilt. So, without further ado, here's B-Man and George with the Demonland podcast.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is not Andy, but George, as Andy is unable to join us tonight due to family commitments. And this week, unfortunately, the Demons went down in a gallant 17-point loss to Adelaide after leading 10 minutes into the final quarter, but faded through AFL-induced fixturing fatigue. Joining me tonight to discuss this game and the statistics is Binman. Welcome, Binman.
G'day, George. Good evening, everyone out there in Demonland. G'day, Andy, if you happen to be listening to this. Yeah, Andy had family commitments that he double booked and he prioritised his family over us, George. It's remarkable, really, but probably pragmatically it's quite clever given we might make finals this year. His family might have been thinking we're a show at doing something in October, but hopefully that's not the case.
Either way, he builds up brownie points in the event that we are.
Yes, that's true, and maybe the whole family, the whole Demonland family, can go to the footy together as a family outing. It was it's really interesting in terms of the result of the game because, I guess it's like anything, isn't it? It depends what your expectations going in were, and it played out. Almost exactly, to be honest, if I was honest about, well, not far off it, at least in my preview pod that I did last week, which I'll touch on in a second when we do the stats file review. But, it did pan out how I thought it would and how I feared it might. A huge effort by the boys. I was so proud of them. And I think that the framing of there's Demonland's an interesting insight, isn't it, into people's reactions, and there's obviously the instant reactions, but I think that there's a number of questions about it, which we'll unpack tonight around fatigue, and you touched on it then in terms of the AFL-induced fixturing. It's just outrageous, and it's just a sort of thread that I've been talking about for a few years, but it's really sort of present this year is how it's just ignored by the media, like the fatigue and the impact of fatigue, but also the way the game's changed into just really a running thing. You need to be elite runners, and they don't even talk about it. And it's so frustrating, just so frustrating. I don't recall in the coverage of that game that, and maybe I missed it, maybe you heard it, is they didn't mention once, I don't think, the fact that we didn't have a bye. We hadn't had a bye yet, not a single time. And I would have thought if you're really serious about providing information about the game of footy that everyone's watching on television, that it's a pretty bloody important key bit of information that, we were running out of legs in that last quarter. It was so obvious, and they didn't mention it. And if you don't talk about that aspect of the game, for me, it's, you can argue till the cows come home about the extent to which it's an issue. But if you completely ignore it as a factor at all, then your analysis is missing it's like having a tyre with a hole in it. You're missing a third of the analysis, and it's just simply not possible to understand that game on the weekend just gone without factoring in the impact of fatigue. It's just ridiculous. And I'm furious. I've been talking about this all season. It's just come to a head now with the bye. The way the AFL have treated us. I got a friend that I'll speak to later, but he did some analysis, mate I pumped with, and looking at, it's not just the bye, it's the number of days break that we've had between games compared to our opponents. Anyway, he provided that, and so I'll speak to that. But I thought it was just a fantastic effort. And, again, our injury list is barely being mentioned by the media. Everyone talks about the Dogs' injury list. Our injury list is every bit as bad as the Dogs, maybe not quite as bad in terms of you haven't got it's pretty close, I'll tell you. But by far, of the teams in the top six, by far, like it's not even in the same field of conversation, by far we have the worst injury list of the top six teams in the AFL, like by the length of the Flemington Strait, it is. So remarkable where we sit. It's 6, isn't it, at this stage with a bye. It's the bye coming up. It's a good chance to take a breath, and so we're sitting in a great position, I reckon, and it's about right. I said that the ladder doesn't lie. We'll drop down. Obviously, next week we can't get 4 points, but we won't lose.
So. Yeah, I don't think we'll actually move too much this week with the bye, given the other teams where they sit and who they're playing. But we'll find out at the end. We might drop 1, maybe 2 spots.
Yeah.
But it's a great position to be in at this time. Here we are, 17 rounds into the season. It'll be a great spot to be in. We're certainly not going to drop out of the top 10 at this stage. So that's heartening for all the Demon fans. Yeah, the other thing apart from the fixturing was I think someone on Demonland said we played 3 games in 12 days. So just to top it all off, not getting much break between the games regardless. So that affects every team.
Yeah, 3 games. And I didn't actually even realise that because they're sort of looking at a bubble. But when you look at it 3 and 12, and again, this team we played had like a 9-day break. And I'll speak to that later in terms of the impact of the difference between breaks. The other thing is that was talked about. I actually haven't had a chance yet to. Have you watched the presser, King's presser?
Yes. Yeah.
I've been meaning to, and I just didn't get time to get to it today. It was on my to-do list, never got round to it. I don't know about you, but watching on the box, that's the most irritated I've seen King all season. And what was his presser like?
It was quite didn't take much out of it, surprisingly, compared to previous, but nothing memorable.
Because I read somewhere on Demonland he made some comment about something about like when you miss a goal from the goal line or something, or that
I don't recall that. I mean that's the losing coach's explanation for everything. It's all about execution, which it is at the end of the day. But it's only and in a game where you only lose by a couple of points, effectively, a couple of goals in the end.
Yeah, I mean that last goal not flattered at it, but it was like it was that classic thing where you're pushing and they get the goal to get it out to 17. But 11 points would have been, I think, I think pretty reflective of the teams. And again, for me, it's one of the things it really depends on what you're thinking going into that match is how disappointed you are. And given the fact that, I'm pretty optimistic. But in my preview pod last week, which I'll speak to in a sec, I predicted we'd lose. So, and said that the betting line was about right. So it's, played out like I thought it would play out. So it's a bit hard to be disappointed. And in fact, quite the opposite is that I rate the Crows. I think they're good, but I just think that was way over pumped. They were getting pumped up way too much on the back of, that win over the Cats in the wet, which was okay. They won, but they won by a point. And then the Dogs, and as we talked about last week, the Dogs were hopeless. They barely missed in that first quarter. I think it was 9-2 at the end of the first quarter against the Dogs. And so, look, and they've got a pretty good run home in terms of their fixture. So as I said in the preview pod, they're definitely a good chance of finishing top 4. But based on what I saw, we've got their measure. Like I think they're not. I think we've got the method and the profile and the form of the game style to beat them. And for me, I'd be more worried if I was a Crows fan with that win. They had almost their best 23. They had Pedler out. I think I had a look at it maybe.
But it was who they brought back this week was Rochelle, Tex Walker, and the previous week
Rankin
Rankin and also Tolstrup, not Tolstrup.
Keane.
Tilthorpe and
Tilthorpe,
Keane.
But Keane was the big one, and I talked about him. And so their ins were amazing. And I think My assessment of their list is they've got 5 of best 23 out at the moment. Crows, Pedler, Hinge, Cummings is probably borderline, Archie borderline because he's not played that much footy, and Butts, and that's it. And none of them are really top. I don't know, Pedler, is he top 10 in their list, do you reckon?
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
I wouldn't have thought so. So 5 of their best 23 outs are almost their very best list available for that game, off 3 weeks after a bye, off a 9-day break from their previous match, and we've been smashed. And I reckon for us, we've got 11 on our injury list at the moment, 7 of which are unarguably, in my view, best 23. Salem, Windsor, Viney, Mychek, Cully, Petty and Lindsay. And you could throw in Andy Menez-Wakefield if you thought he was best 23 as well. Then you're looking at 8 best 20. That's a third of the best 23 not available for this match. And of that list, I don't know, you'd probably... maybe none of them are top 10. Will Windsor was back in this week, I guess. So it was. I thought it was a terrific effort, and if I was a Crows fan, it wouldn't have filled me with confidence because, and again, it was so frustrating watching the coverage because they didn't mention that. It was a pretty important factor in terms of assessing the two teams and their level of performance. They didn't move the ball particularly well, although they didn't. They moved it better than us in this match. I thought they, as I said in the preview pod last week, they're such a meat and potatoes old school way of playing footy at the moment. Like their handball meters gained is like 18th or something in the AFL or 16th, and they just don't. They're not playing the way some teams are. And last year that got found out in the finals, didn't it? Like they won. Yeah. They won the last 8. From memory, they won the last 8 after their bye, so maybe it's a good sort of sign for us. But people forget about their performance last year. They were, I think, 5th or 6th at this stage of the season.
But and then importantly, to give you an idea of with a full side, they finished top of the ladder last year. Fell apart in the finals.
Yes,
it's easy to forget that, and it's easy to forget that. This was a game 4th versus 6th, so you expect a close game, which it ultimately turned out to be.
Exactly.
But if that was played at the MCG, the result would probably be reversed because the Adelaide crowd were certainly influencing some of the umpiring decisions. And while you don't want to, use that as an out when the game is decided by, effectively two kicks. It does become a factor, but the other really impressive thing for me was the way our defence held up. Given the way attack, they were absolutely superb throughout the whole game. But that was also for the whole team. We were in their face every single time they got hold of the ball. They weren't allowed to run freely. We were holding them up, stopping them what they wanted to do. And ultimately, as we said, it came down to a couple of kicks in the game. And obviously, we were very tired, but we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah.
So moving on from here, just to remind everyone, to check out Binner's Stats File podcast every Friday, although he'll take a week off this week. And we'd love you to share your thoughts with fellow Demon fans in the weekly Demonland podcast thread, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Now, with a bye this week, and after that, with Andy and Binman actually overseas, past that, we'll post up at some stage when we'll actually do the next podcast, but don't miss out on Binners will put something up separately about his weekly stats file closer to the match, and he'll talk about that a little bit later on. So that just letting everyone know what to keep their eye out for so they can get their Demonland fix over the next week or two. So we'll move on to Bin Man's stats file, and all yours.
Thanks, George. So stats file review, just a bit of housekeeping, I guess. I've been doing the stats file preview podcast, as people know. I spent the first little while sort of experimenting, I guess, with different methods. And I made a note there's a thread for those podcasts on Demonland. I made a note a few weeks ago that I was going to review it in a few weeks and perhaps look at just doing the preview part of the podcast, not the review. But I'd muddle forward for a few weeks to see, and then when I get to the bye, that I would look at what works best, and that's where we're at. So I'm going to change the Stats File preview podcast. It probably will end up coming out on the Friday. I'm going to try and get it out earlier, probably on the Wednesday. I'm just going to do the preview of the upcoming match though, so I'm no longer going to do the review of that match, and I'm going to use my time here, my 10 minutes on the Demonland podcast to do a review of the game, but using the structure of my preview so that those two things are connected, those two podcasts are connected. So that will be the focus. I won't do a podcast this week reviewing this game, the Crows game, but I will next week probably do a sort of a standalone Stats File podcast review of our season thus far, where our rankings are in particular, key stats, some comparison from where we were last year, for instance, and comparison where contenders have been. So as I mentioned before, Adelaide provide a really interesting comparison for moving forward because they're about where we were at this stage last year in the same round, and then they went on a run coming into the finals, won their last 8 games running into the final, ended up game clear on top of the ladder from memory. So, so that'll change a bit. Even for me, 45 minutes of reviewing a game that was almost a week old was getting a bit much. So so thanks for all the listeners who pushed their way through the review. But so now going forward for the preview pod, it'll just be the preview. So looking at that, I'm going to sort of go through the structure that I do in the preview to review the game just gone. I mentioned the Crows had 5 of their best 23 out, and we had 6 or 7 of our best 23 out. For me, as I said, the thinking about the game coming in and whether, assessing the performance is really dependent to a large degree on what your thinking was coming into the game. And for me, coming into the game, as this is what I discussed on the Stats File preview podcast, for me, it was going to come down to fitness and running power, and that was my main concern going into the match. The Crows were 3 games post-bye. They looked powerful in their wins over the Cats at Adelaide. Adelaide Oval, it was pretty wet and slippery, though, that game, and they were really dynamic against the Dogs. But as I said before, they kicked the lights out in that first quarter, kicked 9-2, and the game was over. They looked in great nick in both of those games. I think that's a big reason for their uptick in form of recent times. But, conversely, it's so obvious we're really, really needing our bye. And so the game was obviously at Adelaide Oval. So for me, logic suggested coming into the game that they had a significant advantage, and I wasn't surprised in the least that we opened at 279, which I thought was a little bit short, and drifted to 318. It went out to 327, came into 318. That's a big drift in footy betting because the pools aren't that big, so it's a pretty big bet. And as I said on the preview, to be honest, in leading into the game, I thought those odds were about right. So it panned out. I was not surprised with the result. I really liked how King pumped this game up. I liked the approach he took, and the fact that we could throw everything at it knowing that we've finally got our 2-week break coming up. He looked visibly disappointed and stressed in the box and angry at different things, and I think they really set themselves for this. I have no doubt that they thought they were a real shot at winning this game. I reckon Kingy had the boys in the right headspace. As you said, I thought their intent was fantastic. I just couldn't see, though, us having the legs to go into our full turbo transition mode that we like to do, and the numbers bear that out. We just couldn't get any ping off the halfback flank. We couldn't get much really good running going, a little bit of it early on, and as the game wore on, our tiredness, fatigue took over and we got less and less. The Crows are really, like I said before, a real meat and potato team, all about contest and pressure. We are too, though. I think we really have been that way, except for perhaps at the Giants game. In the last few weeks, we've been really great with our contest and pressure. For me, it was always going to be about the contest this game and winning the clearance battle, contest inside 50. At the end of the day, though, I reckon the Crows are a little bit overrated. Everyone's jumping up and down about them. My head says we'll do well to win. That's what I said coming into the game. And as I noted on the preview pod, I couldn't quite bring myself to saying we won't win, but that's as close as I'll get to saying we won't win. My heart, though, going in, thought we were a real red-hot chance, and that's how it panned out. I thought the key players going into the game from a Crows perspective would be Jordan Dawson, number 1 rated player in the AFL for the last 6 weeks, number 2 for the season. Obviously, Maxi and Cos were key for us, and Cos was way down. Lachlan McAndrew I thought would be key because he needed to mitigate Maxi. I thought Keys would be key because ground ball gets inside 50 would be so critical. He's number 2 in the AFL for ground ball gets, a heart and soul player. He was pretty important. I thought Lachlan McAndrew did all right. Jordan Dawson was good in parts, but not his brilliant best. The one I highlighted, the other ones that you talked about are also highlighted as key players coming in, Rochelle, or key players for them, Rochelle, Rankin and Walker. I don't think any of them really particularly had that bigger influence. Walker certainly didn't. Rochelle, a little bit. Rankin was quiet. The player I highlighted as the one that I thought was really critical for them was Keane, and he was massive in this game. He was unbelievable. I was surprised when I was looking at the number. Last year, he was number 3 in the AFL for intercepts. He was number 6 for 1%ers, number 16 in the AFL for rebounding from the back, and he made the All-Australian squad off the back of those numbers. I didn't realise that he was so strong, and I thought he was a super influential player. For me, going in the preview, the keys to winning from a statistical point of view were we needed to win the contest, number 1. And we did, 146 to 134. We were plus 12 for the contest. For a bit of context, our AFL average is 129 contested possessions per game. Our season average is 133. So we were well above our season average for contested possessions, plus 12 for contested possessions. I mentioned that ground ball gets would be critical. We were plus 17 for ground ball gets. Really, really terrific. Some of these numbers here, I think it helps explain why King was so frustrated. I think he really thought if we could get these numbers the way we wanted to get them looking, we'd be in a real shot at winning the game, and I think that's what turned out. We were split the post-clearance contested possessions. I thought would be key. That was 89 apiece. Post-clearance ground ball gets, which is a really important number, is 66.53. We were plus 50, plus 13 for ground ball, post-clearance ground ball gets. For context, our season average is 60.9, so above our season average for clearance ground ball gets. Fantastic performance from a contested point of view. But of the contest, the one that jumped out that was a real problem for us all night was actually amazing is that AFL average per game for contested marks, as we've been talking about, they've really dropped off in the last few years. Only 9 contested marks are taken on average per game in footy these days. We took 3 in this game. We only took 3. Have a guess what they took, George?
I didn't look at theirs, but yeah, I'd seen the 3 for us, particularly with Max Gawn in the side.
We're number 2 in the AFL, and maybe even number 1 for contested marks. It's been a remarkable strength for us this year. I don't think we've lost this differential, at least we wouldn't have lost this differential more than 2 times max, I reckon, all season. Contested marks was 3 to 16. They took 16 contested marks. And watching the game live, it was one of those things where you didn't need the stats to see it. They just were. We could not bring the ball to the ground in the back half. We'll unpack that a little bit. I think the forwards really, I could imagine King would have been super frustrated with, Pet's out was a huge out, massive out, because we just could not bring the ball to ground. They killed us with intercept marking and their contested marking. 16 contested marks in a game of footy is, it's not far off double the AFL average. That's crazy. So, keys to winning the contest, number 1, win the contest and our pressure. I'll speak to this in a bit more detail when we talk about the question fatigue. This tells the tale, really. For the match, our pressure rating was 164, 180 is considered AFL average, 200 is considered elite. They were 191 in this game. Minus 27 for pressure. It's amazing we got anywhere close to them. So just as it often happens when you're fatigued, our highest pressure rating was 177 in the first quarter, and then by the last quarter it was down to 155. We just were running out of gas, and but their effort couldn't be knocked, I think. The second key for winning was winning the clearance and stoppage battle, particularly inside 50 in the front half of the ground. I thought that was going to be a critical factor in us winning the game, or who won the game. And we were pretty good in that space. So we won total clearances. We had 11 more clearances than them in total. We had 42. We won 42 clearances. AFL average is 35.3, so well above that. Our season average is 36.9, so well above our season average. This is just the numbers of clearances. We had 13 centre clearances to them, their 5, so we're +8 for centre clearances. We had 3 more around the ground stoppages than them, 29 to 26. We got first possession from in clearances 11 more times, and we turned them into clearances at a slightly higher rate than they did. So big tick for winning the clearance and stoppage battle. King would have been thrilled with that. We won the contest battle. So big 2 ticks for those 2 keys to winning. Winning the post clearance battle, I said, would be key. As I said, we smashed post clearance post clearance ground ball. We're +13. Post clearance contested possessions, we were the same. So, but tick in that space too. In terms of drilling down on the post clearance number, they were really interesting. This is where the contested marks comes into play. Post clearance, that's where the contested marks 3 to 16 -13. But otherwise, we had 5 more hard ball gets than them, 8 more loose ball gets than them, and frees were equal for, at least in post clearances. We winning the inside 50 ground ball get, I said, would be critical. I couldn't see the inside 50 ground ball. I might have just missed it, but we led ground ball in total by 17. So we had 17 more ground ball wins than them across the ground. The other one that I thought would be critical was leveraging our advantage in the ruck. We won the clearance battle in terms of the raw numbers, but we just did not turn that into. We had more than them, but we didn't turn that into the advantage that King would have wanted. So again, we didn't score from the centre bounce this time. So I think from memory it was 0, 4, 7, and 7 our last 4 matches, something like that. So in total over 4 matches, I don't think we've scored more than 18, 19 points collectively from the centre bounces. That's a massive drop-off, obviously, from earlier in the season. We're averaging 12.2 a game, and we didn't score. They only scored 6, so they outscored us from centre bounces 6-0. Around the ground stoppages, though, we did really well. 27 points we scored from around non-centre bounce stoppages. They scored 10. So in total, we were +11 for scores from stoppages. So a tick there, though they would have been hoping to be +20 or something. So, but nonetheless, a tick. But this is where it starts going south in terms of the where we lost the game, essentially. So the other big factor I said would be key to us winning this game was winning the scores from turnover, winning that battle, and they smashed us. This was a horror show. So they scored 63 points in this game from turnover. We're giving up 52 points a game. So they smashed us. We could only manage 35 points from turnover. So there's the game right there. That's a 28-point differential from scores from turnover. So the short version of all of that is, despite winning the ball on the inside, we had 13 more contested possessions, but they used it much better on the outside. They had 63 more uncontested marks. And scored from 14% more of their inside 50 entries. Transition is our go, and they were better at transitioning the ball from the back half. They scored 48 points from their defensive half intercepts. We could only score 15 points from our defensive half intercepts. As I said, we led the clearances by 11, ground ball gets by 17. But despite that, and despite having 2 more entries for the match, we turned it over 21% of our kicks inside 50, 21% of our kicks inside 50 we turned over, which is just appalling, and that speaks to those intercept marks. 12%, the Crows only turned it over 12% going inside 50. Their retention was so much better. Some other key factors in terms of the loss, this is that same thing. So we were smashed for disposal retention, we were smashed for disposal efficiency. Our kicking efficiency was 62%. There was 75.2%. Kick into forward 50 retention, which is the number I just spoke to before, 37%. Oh, no, it's not. 37% of the time we kicked it inside 50, we retained it. They retained it 42.9. This was the big one, the number one of any stat. This is the one that told the difference between the two teams. Clangers. So 75 clangers we did in this game. And partly that's fatigue and there's other things, but partly it's because we've got players with poor technique and we've got so many of our best that's where your best 23s not playing really hit the rubber hits the road. 75 clangers to 52 plus 23 clangers we were. That is just an absolute horror show. For context, our season average is 56.4 clangers, so 21 almost or 20 clangers more than we average. So AFL average is 57, so 18 more than that. That really, I think, was the biggest factor in the loss. We just were appalling with our kicking. I spoke before, I thought this was a key number. They took 22 intercept marks. We took 13. They killed us in that space. That was a shocker. They had 13 more intercepts in total. They had 18 more tackles. They had 3 more tackles inside 50. And they didn't lose a single defensive one-on-one contest. We lost 37.5% of our defensive one. And so I spoke quickly to the transition. We're a transition team. It was pretty much 50-50 for the time in forward half. We had 3 more inside 50s. We had only 2 less shots at goals, but we only scored 29.3% of the time when we went inside 50. They scored a crazy 43.6% of the time when they went inside 50. They took 11 marks inside 50. Their 50, we only took 6. Points from defensive half, again, this speaks to the transition stuff. We're averaging 37.3 from our defensive half this season. We only scored 16 in this match. That's our season low. That's horrible. We're giving up 39.4 from our defensive half. Our opponents are scoring. In this match, they scored 48 points from their defensive half. So that's 32 more points from defensive half. And we are a much, much better transition team. So for me, that really is another sort of piece of the puzzle around our fatigue. Just finally, player ratings. This is it was a surprise for me that he rated so high. Van Rooyen was our highest rated player, 19. I think that would be close to his highest ever rated. He might have had a couple around that 20. 13.4 of those rating points were in the first quarter. A fantastic first quarter. I think he kicked 3, didn't he, in that first quarter?
Yeah, that's right.
Kicked 3, gave off a couple. That's how you accrue those player rating points, because it's all about scoreboard impact. Cade Chandler was our second highest rated player, 18.9. Another fantastic performance by Cade. His third quarter was massive, 10.9 player rating points. Maxi Gawn, he's just, I've got no more words for how good his season's been. It's just been incredible. He was our third highest rated player, 18.9. Just about, I think, I can't believe he's not talked about as the best player in the game in that everyone talks about Bontempelli and Dacos, but Max's consistent brilliance is unbelievable. Having said that, of his 18.9, 11 of them came from how he got the footy and winning the contest. It's amazing how he does that. His ball use was horrible. For someone who scored 18.9 player rating points, his ball use was negative 0.6. Jack Steele, 4, and Tommy Sparrow was our 5th highest rated player. Our lowest rated player was Paddy Cross, who looked like he was hitting the wall a little bit. His was minus 0.1. No surprise here. Jakey Melksham I just had a terrible game. I was really surprised he was selected. I said that in the preview podcast, and I wasn't surprised in the end that I was surprised. He had a negative 0.6 his player rating, and Jeffo, the ever controversial Jefferson in terms of where people stand on him, he was our 3rd lowest rated player, and then Luca Canfield. So we had a lot of players who really struggled. Just interestingly, finally, the expected score was, for the first time in 4 weeks, our actual score was above our expected score. So the expected score was only 52.7. Our actual score was 62. Their expected score was 67, and their actual score was 79. So, it was about right in terms of the margin. Either way, if we'd taken our chances, we did take our chances. So, we didn't kick ourselves out of it. Impressive. I thought great effort. Our contest was great. Our attitude was great. We just ran out of gas is the simple version.
What was Cozzy's player rating? Because he was way, way, way down from what he normally is.
Oh, he was way down, wasn't he? And you hate, I was about to say you hate to make it, excuses, but that's exactly what I rail against. He looked like he was either crook, or something was up, or he obviously fatigued, but I think more he looked crook.
Yeah, because, it was reported during the week that he had some illness, and I think he missed the training session during the week as well. But it was hard to say because he's been travelling back and forth to Darwin. But when they rested him in the forward line, particularly in that last quarter, that sent a big message that he was not well.
Yeah. I mean, both you and I are old enough to remember that back in the day, that's what you did with the players who couldn't run.
Yeah,
That's where life got put in. It's like one out in the goal square, or
were injured and couldn't do anything else. Yeah,
exactly. Who were crocs, and you go, well, where are you going to put him? You put it, and that's exactly what I thought. It's funny you should say that, because I thought that was a throwback. You clear the forward line. The King hasn't done that all season, and put Cozzy down there. And then the big tell for me was that, was it in the last quarter? Maybe it was, where he had the ball, he had the goal in front of him, no one between him and the goal, and he couldn't get distance from the player he was trying to run away from, and then he didn't even make the distance with the kick, and he looked so frustrated. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if there was something up health-wise for him, and it shows the difference. I mean, if he plays the level that he has been for the last few weeks, we probably win that game.
Yeah.
To answer your question, his player rating points is a season low by a bazillion miles, I think. 6.6 player rating points he had. And for the first time this season, his ball use was in the negative. So of his 6.6 player rating points, 6.7 for how he won the footy, for his ball winning, getting the footy, the contest. And he lost negative 0.2. He lost 0.2 for how he used the footy. That's the worst he's used the footy in, certainly this season, isn't it? So, and it just shows how much every team, needs their best players up and about. But it was a massive factor. The other one that jumps out, it's really, what's your take on? I find it really fascinating, the conversation about Trent Rivers. It's like the version of a hyper version of the Jefferson. There's real two camps emerging.
Yeah, it's not the Trent Rivers that we've seen before. I said there was some strange training activity 2 weeks ago where he was involved on his own. So I'm not sure whether there's some sort of injury or something else going on. He seems to be back to his brilliant best at times, and then disappears completely at others. So I'm not sure what is going on.
Yeah, my feeling is, and myself included, and this was a few weeks back, that I was being a bit hard on him. And I think people are being a bit hard on him. And the facts are, in terms of, it depends how much weight you put in the player rating, but this is his lowest player rating he's had since he's come back into the team. He's been up in the mid, he's been our second and third highest rated player in almost every game bar this one. So I thought Tommy McDonald had another sort of solid citizen game as well. Eddie Langdon, we'll put it this way, Trent Rivers' player rating was 6.3, Ed Langdon's was 5. No one's bagging Eddie Langdon for that game. No one. And if you go down further, no one's criticising Tolstrup. He was pretty unsighted, 2.3 player ratings. Ditto for Blake Howes, who's been good this season. So, I thought it would not surprise me at all if he was crook. He looked crook, didn't he? Because he looked sort of comfortable. And who was playing on him? They had
No, I can't remember.
They had someone sort of going with him, but I don't think they probably needed to, because he certainly wasn't dynamic in the way that he has been.
No. That's it. All right. Okay, thanks for that, Binman. And for everyone, don't forget Binman's preview stat files on Friday week. Hopefully.
So, I will preview, well, hopefully the Wednesday I'll preview the Hawks game. That'll be the next preview. And my plan is at this stage, middle of next week, to do a sort of a review of the key stats of where we are at this stage as we look forward to the last third and our push towards finals. That's the plan for the next couple of weeks in terms of the Stats File podcasts.
Okay, thanks to Binman, and we'll move on to the listener questions tonight. There's been a lot of them, I've tried to keep them as concise as possible, but we'll work through them slowly. Firstly, talking about the forward line in particular, Travie 14. Gents, a frustrating loss. Honestly, think it was just poor skills at the worst possible times. In saying that, I've been worried that we were too tall and slow in our forward line. JVR, Kentfield, Jeffo, Fritter and Melcham. This looks to be confusing the young forwards, and Melcham can't get back in defence quick enough, and in turn doesn't transition into offence quick enough to get into dangerous spots. The game has sped up a notch this year, and he looks to have been left behind, unfortunately. Do you agree we are playing a bit tall forward with the ball, I'd like to see Melcham come out and a small come in, then let Kentfield fly at the packs. Others from Pitmaster, who's made a couple of contributions, but I've plucked this one out for him. Sorry to say, but I think we played a man short with Melky in the team. His judgment is probably still there, but I fear his body is done. So I'll lead off with this one. Firstly, the tall forwards question. Unfortunately, the reality is we lost Petty and Myercheck over the last couple of weeks, and that's really affected everything else. As I've mentioned in previous weeks, the top teams in the ladder, mainly the top 6, all use 3 tall forwards of some sort and 3 smalls effectively, although there's transition in and out with that. So having lost Petty and Myercheck, the cupboard's getting a bit bare. So we have JVR, Jeffo and Kentfield. And unfortunately this week, you really couldn't say we were too tall because Kentfield only played 29% game time. He spent time in the ruck and the usual problems that we've highlighted before about rucking someone and expecting them to play forward as well, but only 29% game time, I think was a really poor use of Kentfield. They might as well have brought Heath in, who was kept as the emergency. At least then you've got a ruck, a prime ruck, and I thought it was just a poor use of the available resources. Unfortunately, we can't use any less people because there is no one at Casey. There's no more. The only other forward we've really got playing at Casey is Tom Matthews, and while I would have liked to have him in this game instead of Melcham, that's the only forward we've got left in the barrel, so to speak. We're out of options in these areas, so don't expect to see much change. It'll depend in the coming games whether Petty, for example, comes back and is available post his hamstring injury. But here we are 2 weeks out before the game. We don't really know what the situation is. Milk, unfortunately, this was one of the worst games that you could experience for an individual player. 3 possessions in total, of which only 1 was a kick. I've been saying I don't know why he was selected in the last couple of weeks. In any case, there wasn't any outstanding performances from at Casey that would warrant it. And if you want to, he just hasn't got the legs anymore, unfortunately. I think the most telling sequence of plays was when Sharp was coming down the wing, had run almost the whole length of the ground and kicked a beautifully weighted kick into the forward line, into the pocket, and Melcham couldn't make the distance. He couldn't run to get to where the ball had been placed perfectly. That just really summed it up for me. He just can't make the play. It's a young man's game. And the other thing is, you look through some of the statistics of the smaller Adelaide backmen, with Keane 15 possessions, Laird 26, and Michael Annie 20, and Melcham's got 3. It's I'm afraid Father Time has caught up, and the first opportunity that I suspect the selectors will get, he won't be around.
Yeah, as I said in the preview pod, I was surprised he got selected. I was surprised he got selected for the Pies, but I saw the logic against the Pies because it was going to be wet and slippery, and it was going to be wet and slippery in this game and turned out to be the case. So maybe that was part of the thinking. But, so I thought I could see the logic against the Pies. I couldn't see the logic at all in this game because his performance against the Pies I didn't think warranted it. And as you say, it wasn't like he was banging the door down, in the couple of weeks prior at Casey. I'm guessing this is the frustration of a new senior coach, I guess, is he would have hoped, obviously, that he put some faith in Melcham to have an improved game, and unfortunately Melk didn't deliver, did he? And the other thing is that, that you touched on slightly is, and I touched on in terms of how many intercepts they didn't, intercept marks. The number one role for the marking forwards the key forwards, and he sort of was playing a key role, is if you can't mark it, bring it to ground. And we were hopeless in that aspect of the game. And that's one of his number one things. And I don't know whether he probably doesn't have the legs to go with Keane, but Keane was cutting us up. His kicking is beautiful. God, I hate these Irish boys. Their kicking is amazing, isn't it? Like they're all amazing. He's an amazing player. He was poor, and the problem also is if he's not kicking goals or and or negating an intercept marking defender, his lack of leg speed means that he can't really sort of contribute on all team defense the way others can. And speaking of which, I was equally, so I thought, you could argue, well, we needed a forward in, we needed an experienced one, director, Maya check out or whatever, but I would have thought better to bring in another runner, Henderson, or not drop Laurie, or and pay Kenfield. Like, I thought, I totally agree with you. I've been, pumping up King this year. I think he's been tactically brilliant, but I think that was a misjudgment in, one, having Melksham in the team, two, having Kenfield the way they used him. I mean, he's not really that great a ruck. Why not? Why I couldn't understand why they didn't bring. I forgot he was playing initially, but then when he came on, I thought, oh yeah, Kenfield's playing. Why didn't they bring Melksham off and put Kenfield at least resting forward? He would have brought the ball to ground.
Yeah.
It was a bit baffling. I thought maybe there was an injury there going on, but then why would you ruck him? Like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, especially off a dodgy knee, and against Tilthorpe, who's a monster of a man. Even if he can't ruck all that much, he's still a sizable opponent.
Yeah, and so I thought that was strange. And my knock on Kenfield is, it's funny, you get confirmation bias. And this is a good example of the difference between, of the importance from my perspective of not just relying on your eye and where the advantage of having, watching the game and then also looking at the data to see whether it supports your assessment is. My knock on Kenfield is I reckon he's slow. And off the mark and acceleration. But as I do every week, I look at the AFL tracker data on AFL.com, and anyone who doesn't want it, it's really fascinating, particularly if you do what I do, which is look at it every week. So you get to see the trends. So, for instance, I know, because I look at it every week, against the Swans, for instance, we ran to 304 or 305 Ks or something. In this game, we ran 294. Now, that doesn't sound a hell of a lot, but that's 10 kilometres less. Adds up. But in terms of Kenfield, I couldn't believe this when I saw it. Average speed in attack. So that's average speed when your team has the ball, not in the attacking half of the ground. Average speed in attack, the fastest player on the ground, average speed in attack was Fitzgerald, 11.6. Number 2, Kenfield. I found that fascinating. So he averaged 9.6 kilometres an hour in attack, and in defence, this was even more remarkable. So average speed in defence is defined as when the opposition has the ball, not when it's in defence. Average speed of an individual player while the opposition has possession. Number 1 player on the ground for average speed in defence when the opponent has the ball was Luca Kenfield, 10.4. Now, perhaps that's to do with the fact that he only had 29% game time, right? So he's fresh, but nonetheless, he's quicker than I had. He's quicker over the ground than I thought. Just as a notable thing that I had to laugh. Who do you reckon the number 1 player for distance was in this game?
It'd have to be Ed, surely.
Well, just 16.4 kilometres he ran in this game. This is the second time this season he's run over 16 kilometres. So it was 16.9 against, was it the Pies or one a couple of weeks back?
Yeah.
And 16.4. Who do you reckon was number 2?
Oh, I reckon Sharp may have gone close.
He wasn't actually in total. But this is not for Melbourne player, for all players.
Ooh.
So Langdon was number 1 with 16.4 kilometres total distance covered in this ground. In this game. There was 4 players. I'll give you a tip. There were 5 of the top 5. So in the tracker, it only lists the top 5. I wish they had them all, but they only have the top 5. So of the top 5 players total distance run, Langdon was number 1, 16.4. Number 3 was Colt, 14.5. Bowie, 14.4 was 4th, and Tommy McDonald was the 5th on the ground for total distance run, 14.3, leaving number 2. The Adelaide Crows player.
Rochelle.
Nibbler. Of course, the ultimate, the original high half forward, the man who invented the role, the high half forward deluxe. So,
and for our listeners, a bin man's love child.
Yeah. But I have to say, I love Neil Bullen, and he was good in this game. There's a lot of comparisons between him and Chin. And Chin credits Neil Bullen for showing him how to prepare elite AFL level. This is no knock on Nibbler. This is more a pumping up Chin. Chin's gone past Nibbler in terms of he's got more tricks. He kicks goals. He's a better kick. I thought that was interesting. The distance at high speed was an interesting one. Number one was Keys. Langdon was second, and Neil Bullen was third. Sometimes the numbers don't, but maybe with Kentfield, he's quicker than I thought, but perhaps it's to do with being only on the ground 29% of the time. So
let's hope we use him in a far better way in the coming games. I think it was a wasted opportunity.
Sorry, just on that question about whether we're too tall, I agree with you. I think even you look at the Adelaide team, like they had tall players everywhere. Like, what's his name? The one who Taylor Walker's little mini me. What's his name? I'll think of it. I think that one they always say is so accurate. It's like, I'll think of it in a sec. But Phil Thorpe, of course. So they've got a pretty tall and a mega ruckman. So he's almost as tall as Maxi, that fella. So I think you're right. It seems to be, and it's all about bringing the ball to ground, isn't it? Winning those ground ball gets, and we just were hopeless in that space, I thought, in this game.
Okay, next area from our listeners' questions is around fatigue, and we're letting Bin Man loose on this one. First one from Monocular. As much as we all loathe the term gallant loss, it's hard to describe it as otherwise. Against all odds, cooked with no bye, injury to key personnel, Adelaide crowd, umpire 22, etc., we could or should have stolen it. Was it mainly the very obvious fatigue or lack of collective experience in this game plan? Bowser Power asks, we seem to lack the hardness required to record a win in the end. Why is this? Lazy asks, I would like to be the one to get Bin Man going on this, and I'm sure you will, Lazy. We spoke briefly about it on the post-game thread. I don't love to use this as an excuse or a deciding factor in games, but the fatigue levels were at new heights in the second half. The fixturing has played a big part, but why is it that this never gets any airtime in the commentary or the shows? Long Suffering No More asks, sitting behind the goals really showed up how absolutely stuffed they were. In that last 15 minutes, they could barely get out of their own way. The media and the club need to highlight this and the unfairness the AFL's scheduling has been to our club. Buck Naked asks, I think we ran out of puff later in the game and we do not handle excessive final style pressure quite yet. Teams that have hit us hard with such pressure have won their matches against us. Is this just that we are a young side pre-bye against a seasoned outfit now building towards finals appearance? Can we learn to cope with pressure better and apply it ourselves? Some individuals were down statistically. Was this due to the pressure, the tiredness of the squad, or something else? What is missing for us to take the next step? Wiley D then asks, last week I posited that the Dees might come out fatigued and suffer a bad loss similar to the Freo match. I was wrong about that for three and a half quarters. The Dees were clearly prepped and similar to the Essendon game went all out in the first half. Had they kicked straighter in Q2, they might have won. However, in the last 15 minutes, suddenly players like Langford and Cozzy fumbled at critical times. Players gave away silly free kicks or made poor decisions or couldn't execute the fundamentals, all signs of fatigue. I don't think we could have given more, and noting Cozzy had his worst game of the year, still so much improvement. Do you agree? And if available, do the stats back up the above? So, Bin Man, a lot of questions in there all along a similar theme. Over to you. You're on mute. You're on mute, Bin Man.
Thanks, George. I'm going to start that rant again. I said, this has been a bugbear of mine all season, and the AFL's fixturing is what I'm talking about, the fact we haven't had a bye. I'm going to launch into this. I agree with Wiley D's post and question there, absolutely. For me, and speaking of the coverage, I mentioned this before, it is just outrageous. It drives me nuts. It's just ridiculous that it wasn't discussed in this game. I mean, for God's sake, it was pretty bloody relevant to the result. Now, for me, the only question is how much weight you put on it. And, it's sort of the one of the questions there was around, what I want to make excuses. It's part of the coverage and the culture of Australian rules football that we've just got to grow up and move past it. I mean, it is the most taxing football sport. It's almost the most taxing team sport in the world to play at the elite level. I've heard that from multiple sort of elite athletes. The amount of running, we just talked about 16.4 kilometres Langdon run after, having done so 2 weeks ago, and then 14 kilometres in the middle. So, he's run, what's that? 32, almost 45 kilometres in 3 weeks of footy, plus whatever he's done during the week. I'm increasingly convinced it's an AFL directive for the broadcasters not to mention, or if they do, underplay it. They talk around they use these metaphors or like euphemisms, and I'm increasingly convinced it's an AFL directive to sort of underplay the impact of fatigue vis-a-vis the ridiculous and completely inequitable fixturing of the buys is such a big factor. I can't believe it wasn't mentioned. It just drives me nuts on the coverage. Like, how could you seriously analyse that game of footy and not mention in the coverage of it? You've got special comments, people coming at you wazoo in those games, and not one of them thinks to say, this team is 3 weeks post-bye, and look, they're running on top of the ground. This team hasn't yet had a bye. 16 weeks in, they've got 9 players in this team under 50 games, and the AFL are not fixturing their bye to around 60. It is just absolutely, it's just mind-numbingly, it's just so frustrating. And look, for me, the number one, to me, the discussion is, what you think about, like, how big a factor it was. But some people don't even think it's a factor. For me, it is the single biggest determinant in this match. If we played this game post-bye, we would have killed the Crows. I have no doubt about that. If that game, if we were both teams equally fresh, we would have won that game. And if we play them again come finals, we will smash the Crows. We will run on top of the ground. Our game is based on running. Talked about it all season. How that looks is overlap handball. We couldn't muster anything from the halfback. That's why I mentioned our inability to score from the back half. We're averaging sort of nearly 40 points from our back half. What was it? I can't remember. It was 15. Like, all of the data just points to it. I'm convinced, as I've mentioned a number of times, our recent strategy of kicking so deep and long into a contest at the top of the goal square, it's and less so in the high transition pie games. In the last 6 weeks, that's been our strategy. That's a strategy to mitigate our lack of run. And getting it deep inside our 50. It's as much about that as it is about scoring, as I mentioned on the podcast last week. We get it inside, we score from ground balls, we set up our defensive structure behind the ball. Maxie made that point a couple of weeks ago when he was talking about those deep kicks to the goal square against the Pies. He said that it allows us to set the ball, our defensive structure up. We can trap it inside. It's less physically taxing because there's less running. But, in terms of the bye, this is, I mentioned at the top, my mate, I'll call him for the sake of this, is the Gorilla. G-Man, mate I've been punting with for a couple of decades. In that time, I've always bet footy. And so we've been tracking the impact of breaks between buys in our betting for a long time. And he wrote to me today, put a message to me in our chat that there's been a lot of talk about the unfairness of the buy, mainly me, he was referring to, which is totally valid criticism. But what hasn't been mentioned is how we've been totally screwed this year in the number of days break between the games we've had compared to our opponents. For example, not only were the Crows third up after their bye, but they had a cushy 9-day break coming into the game compared to our 7. Now, people might say, well, what comes around goes around in that regard, and that's how it's supposed to work. It's how it's supposed to work with a fixture that's in any way vaguely equitable. It's how it's supposed to work in terms of giving them some equity around the breaks between games. But it's 100% not been the case for us this year. So, again, thanks for the Gorilla for this info. From rounds 18 to 22, with the bye coming into round 17, we've only got There's only a handful of times where coming into round 19, we've got a 6-day break. The Roos have 8. Coming into round 20, 6 days break. Cats have 8. Coming into round 21, we have a 9-day break. That's the only one, and the Suns have 8. Coming into round 22, when we play the Dockers. So these are critical games at the end of our season. We have a 6-day break coming into that game against the Dockers. The Dockers have an 8-day break. The best team in the top of the ladder have an 8-day break to us. So we have a significant disadvantage, 6 versus 8-day break 3 times, compared to one of a minor 9 versus 8-day advantage, with one being even. They are just crucifying us this season. And the Suns game, that game where we play the Suns, that's the only game this season where we have any advantage at all. We don't quite know yet what the final 3 fixturing games are, but if they don't give us an advantage, we have only one game all season where we have less days than the opposition. More days than the opposition between games. That is just outrageous and ridiculously unfair. So advantages against 9 times we play teams who have more days rest than we do coming into the game. 9 times. We get it once. That is massive. Of those 9 times, 5 of them are at least 2 days disadvantage between us, like this game. And as I said, we've been following this for a long time, and we factor those breaks in. Of course, every week it doesn't follow, but it does. The trend is very clear. The longer teams have to prepare and break between games, the better they are physically prepared. It makes total sense. 9 times it's happened where the opponent has more days, 5 of them 2 days break once we get that. On top of that, 2 weeks in a row, we played the Giants, who had already had their bye. We played the Pies the following week, who have already had the bye. Both teams had their second bye the following week when we played them. So both teams have had 2 byes before we've had any. Both teams, the Giants and the Pies, could attack their game safe in the knowledge that they had a 2 weeks off after that game. It is just so absolutely unfair. I can't believe it. And for me, the biggest factor in this game by a million miles was the fatigue level. And it's just the AFL. It is unbelievable. I joked on Demonland that the rumour has it that they were in charge of fixing the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. Because only the AFL could stuff that up so badly. Only the AFL. I'm so furious about it. This would just not happen to any other. When you look at who's got the byes this weekend and who hasn't had their 2 byes, it's the Dogs, the Saints and the Demons. That would not happen if it was the Blues, the Tigers, or any of the big clubs. It just would not happen. And the AFL's job is to make it equitable competition, and they are screwing us. And I'm just so furious about it. It just drives me nuts. So yeah, that's my rant on the fatigue. I'm so looking forward to coming out the other side of it. It's a pity we have to go to bloody Launceston to play a game of footy, but we won't know ourselves. So fans who are excited about those first 4 or 5 games where we're, if you think back to that Swans game, round 6 or 7, wasn't it? Running on top of the ground, high scoring, 100 plus, 50 points from our back half, overlap handball, 700-800 metres gained by handball metres gained. We'll get back there. But we can only get back there when we're able to put some fuel back in the tank. We'll load up now. We'll get a good block of training. And maybe, we're in a much better position than I thought we'd be. And maybe the silver lining to all of this is, unlike other teams, we can prepare now, safe in the knowledge we've got that final third of the season run into the finals, and we should be in cherry ripe shape come finals. So look out for the last third of the season, and I cannot wait. I really, really hope we get to play the Crows again, because we will smash them next time. We'll run them off their feet. They will not know what hit them.
Thanks, Spinners. Last area of questions from our listeners was around Jeffo. First from Go Lordy. This might sound a bit weird, but does Jeffo have any mongrel in him? Do AFL players need to have any mongrel? Jeffo seems to be an amiable bloke on the field, smiling, unfussed, out to have a kick around with his mates. I really want him to succeed. We need a marking forward, but am I being dopey and just judging a book by its cover? Terence Langley from Belgium, if I remember, asks, Andy, I wonder whether you or George or Bin Man listened to comments on First Crack about the Demons game. I know that we take anything that David King says with a grain of salt, unlike us hanging on every word our King says. But his comments around Melbourne and particularly Matthew Jefferson caught my attention. Finally, Pitmaster again asks, and possibly an unpopular view, but I think Jeffo showed better intent, a strong contested mark, a couple of packs crashed, and good rebound for that first goal, helped incidentally by a fine shepherd from Luca. Putting aside the glaring errors, did the panel see any improvement in Jeffo? So I'll start off on this one. Unfortunately, this seems to be the regular pattern with Jeffo. He offers glimpses which offer us hope, and then dashes them a week later, or even in the same game. Just remember, this is his 5th year in the system. You'd expect by this stage any AFL player to be showing something on which you can build a sort of a regular spot in the side, but that hasn't been the case. When he was drafted in 2022, other forwards in that draft were Cadman, although he was the first draft pick, Grosecki from GWS. The following year, Jed Walter, Nate Caddy, Logan Morris. They've all been in the system 12 months less. There's a couple of other promising ones even from 2024, and Jonty Fole and Jack Whitlock. I don't think we'd be having the conversation about Jeffo unless he was our first pick and pick 15 in the draft. He's our only option at the moment. I don't know whether he'll stay in the side when Petty comes back. We just have to wait and see on that one. As for the first crack stuff, I watched that as well, and it is David King, and I don't particularly like the way all the commentators these days have started using video of individual actions in the game and not looking at consequences and later actions, and trying to show their own importance in analysis of the game when they miss out on most of it. So they showed one particular play action where Jeffo ran about half the length of the ground to get out for that mark that he ultimately dropped. My question immediately was, who was he running against? If he was running against me, he would have streeted me for sure. But I don't know who he was running against. I don't know what stage it was in the game. Had he just come off the bench? I don't know. This is the trouble when you look at just individual actions in a 30-second play. So the jury's still out on Jeffo. He needs to show something consistently. Obviously, at VFL level, he's a cut above that, but is he at the right level to play AFL consistently? We really don't know yet. Binman, your thoughts?
Look, I mean, I'm torn a little bit. I just think, I agree with what you're saying. I think the question about Go Lordy, does he need some mongrel? I don't care if he has mongrel. I just want him to attack the ball. If that means you need to have mongrel to attack the ball, then so be it. Look, I'm in the share. I'm holding my shares. What did you say you had? The options? You're not even having options on Jeffo, are you? You're trying to dump.
Yeah, I think I've pumped the options.
You should be pumping him up, and then you can dump him properly. Look, I think that I sort of think back to a time when we were a lot more patient with key forwards than we are now. I personally think we've been seduced over the last 15 years with high draft picks who are predominantly midfielders who come into the AFL plug and play, ready to go. Rowe's the best example I can think of, really comes to mind, where, the ceiling isn't as evident. I think that I see flashes of good quality. I actually think he's got really good leading patterns, and I disagree with this idea that he hasn't got good forward craft. I think that's what keeps him. I think that's what gives me hope, is he's got good forward craft. I think if he can he's got another 2-3 years of growing to go yet. So, I get the knocks on him. I mean, I skew positive. I think you make a really good point, is that we should get it out of our mind where he was in the draft pick. It's like, what's that idea of the sunk costs fallacy? But isn't he? Am I right in thinking his contract's been the sunk cost fallacy? I should say. Am I right in thinking his contract's been extended?
I don't think so. Nothing that I've seen.
I thought so. I thought he's got another year after this year on his contract. Andy,
Okay, yeah.
But look, so I'm still well and truly, he's got time. I'm not writing him off. I think for me, I had a really strong feeling about Wiedemann early days. I don't have that about Jefferson. I think there's some similarities in terms of maybe that contest, but he's not. I didn't think Weed would make it from early days. So, and I was proven to be correct with that. So I'm holding on him. But it's interesting you mention Cadman. So, as you say, he's a really good comparison. He's also a key forward. They're both the same height, which I'm amazed at. They both 195 centimetres, so same height. They're both picked in the same draft. Cadman was number 1, and, of course, Jeffo was number 15. So really good players to compare. And I'm just looking at their head-to-head stats. They're actually, Cadman's ahead slightly in goals, like 1.5 goals per game. They're different numbers, 68 games to 15. Inside 50s, Jeffo 1.1, Cadman 1.4. So obviously Cadman's got more goals, the same number of behinds on average. Their tackle numbers are similar. But looking at the important ones, goal assists, they're both 0.4 each. Contested possessions. Now, this one was an interesting one. If you'd asked who would have a better contested possession, it is Cadman, but only just. So Cadman's averaging 3.7 contested possessions a game. Jeffo's averaging 3.5 contested possessions a game. Disposal efficiency is roughly about the same. Jeffo's a little bit below that. Clangers are about the same. Contested marks, 0.9 to Cadman, 0.6 to per game for Jefferson. Let's have a look. 1%ers are about the same. Cadman's got just a bit on each of on these. Score involvements, 4 score involvements per game for Cadman, 3.5 for Jefferson. Now, it's a small sample size, but really, those numbers are relatively similar. No one is talking about Cadman is a bust at this stage. And so I think that, to be fair, we need to, give some time for Cadman as well, for that matter. I see the knocks on him. I think that he can make it, and he'll have the opportunity to. But I think the key thing is you need the Myerchecks in the team, the Petties in the team. He can't be. He's not going to be that key position player, is he? He's going to be a player who runs hard and gets up the ground. Big part of his journey will be, can he get an elite tank? I think he needs another really good AFL preseason in the weight rooms. But best key performance. The best example of this is, if I put these up at the same age of Hawkins, I'll bet you my bottom dollar that Jefferson would be matching Hawkins. Hawkins did not become the player he did. He was on the fringes of the Cats team until he was mid-20s, 24, 25. So, I think that we'll keep him on the list. I can't be stupid not to, I think. I get the criticisms of him, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah, just had a quick look at our Demonland Bible. He's out of contract at the end of this year.
Right. Do you reckon they'll recontract him?
I think they will. Yeah, I don't think he'll get much in terms of years.
What are you going to trade? You're not going to trade him.
No.
You're not going to get a big, bonus coming back the other way, are you? So,
no. Yep. Okay. Moving on to Williamstown, the game against Williamstown for Casey. Did you see any of this, Bin Man?
Yeah, I did, actually. I was going to go to that game, as I said, and then watch it as live. And I have to say, I didn't not go because it was wet, but I forgot to consult a key stakeholder in my dream day on the Saturday of the Socceroos on the Saturday morning, go to the Willie to watch the footy and then watch the Crows as live a bit later in the afternoon. I forgot to check with the key stakeholder here, my wife, about what the plans were for Saturday. So it was that wasn't going to happen. So I did watch it. I had to laugh because I paddle. I'm in an outrigger club. We paddle out the front of the Point Gellibrand, and it looked pretty wicked and wild out there. We wouldn't have been paddling on Saturday. That is 100% for sure.
It would have been a quick way to get to Tasmania in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I had to laugh and had flashbacks of playing junior footy on Glenferrie Oval in the mud in the middle of the ground, because it's the first time I've seen serious mud on a footy oval, like at the AFL level. It's really muddy in the centre of the ground, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I did watch a little bit of it. It wasn't much. It was a pretty challenging game to watch. But,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, Latrell stood out. And I was surprised Latrell didn't get picked in this game. I understood why. He'll be cherry ripe to go after the break straight back in best 23, no doubt.
For the listeners who didn't see the game, there was at least a 5-goal, probably 6-goal win towards one end in this particular game. There were lots of players in long sleeves for very good reasons. Because
Latrell had long sleeve and a jumper on top of his long sleeve.
Yeah. So the major difference, a couple of major differences. Williamstown know how to play that ground beautifully with the wind, and they made full use of it. In the first quarter, they kicked 7 goals, 4, while we managed 2-1 going the opposite direction, which was remarkable in itself. For a couple of players, the other thing that really struck me is around the sizes of the Williamstown players compared to ours. They had 2 rucks, Murcott, who was 210 centimetres. Max Heath, of course, was held over for the emergency for the Adelaide game. But they also had Braden Pruce as their second ruck at 206 centimetres.
Was Pruce in that game? I didn't even realise.
Right. Yeah. So just to top it off, two absolutely monster rucks, and they took full advantage of that. During the game, I thought Williamstown looks like a team full of plumbers, and Casey looked like a team full of electricians. That they were strong, they were tall, they were muscular, they were everything that we weren't.
What are electricians? Why are they not strong, tall, and muscular?
Because they don't dig ditches, and they don't.
I thought because they got tiny hands so they can fit inside the wall.
The plumbers are, the classic sort of suburban football team. Full of tradies, plumbers. Yeah. So unfortunately, heavy wind going one direction. We didn't use it in the second quarter. We got 3 goals, 7 when we were kicking with the wind. We just didn't use it. The old adage about just if you got the ball, just kick it was certainly the way that you played this game. Pickett, Latrell was absolutely far better than any other player on the ground. He was simply just toying with them. Jath was fantastic in the back line.
He was terrific.
So he's certainly putting his hand up for a return. To give you an idea of the strength of the wind, at one stage Stanley was kicking for goal against the wind. He was 20 metres out and didn't make the distance. So it was just howling, quite literally a gale. So not much else to take from this game. Taylor, I was much, much more impressed with in this game. The way when he got possession, he'd look for options, which is what you've got to do at AFL level. It's not just get the ball and bang it on your foot or punch it. He goes for the ball to get possession and then looks to give it off to the best option around him. So he's working his way nicely in the way that he's playing the game. Jeff White only went into Kalani only went into the ruck in the last 5 minutes of the game, but I think that was just to give him a little run more than anything else. He took a couple of very good marks during the game, as did Taylor, surprisingly a really good back mark.
Sorry to interrupt there, Georgia, but I'm really pleased to hear that Xavier Taylor, it looks like he's sort of getting into a better rhythm. But what you just mentioned was basically the number one thing from his scouting and his drafting was his ability to do exactly what you said, is mark and then take on high-risk kicks and make good choices from the halfback flank. And really that's key to why we selected him. So it's great to hear that that's what he's doing. Just on that, shout out to Casey from Casey who does the report each week, and couldn't this week in Pinball Wizard did on Demonland, and great. He sure writes a mean review, does Pinball Wizard, and it was excellent this week. So as is Casey from Casey's every week. So it's always a great thread. That thread. I thought CJ was terrific. I thought Latrell. He did you watch the whole game? I only watched the first.
Yeah, he kicked 4 goals.
He kicked. I said the goal he kicked that. The commentary was really good on it, but he looked like he was going to jink into the corridor and go back onto his right, and he went the opposite way, completely wrong-footed the player, kicked it on his right still, but did it in a way that kicked it out and let the wind bring it back, went straight through the middle. It was one of the most, one of the highest footy IQ things I've seen for many a day. It was just awesome. And the other thing about that coverage of that game that I just loved, I only watched the first half, or maybe a little bit more, but at one point the commentary sound went off, but you could still hear the crowd and the wind and the ball and the players. And I thought, oh man, this is heaven. This is heaven. I would pay good money for coverage of the footy where you could not have the commentators, but you could have the crowd noise. I don't know why they don't offer it. Like in the F1 coverage on KO, you can get camera fan from the guy up in 12th row in the grandstand, and there's about 12 different options you can choose for how you watch it. I would literally pay good money to watch a game where the coverage where the commentators didn't bloody talk. It would be awesome.
Okay, one last thing about AFLW, which starts, I think, the second week in August, and there was a question from Terence Langley again. I know that the three of you go away and above in preparing and delivering the podcast each week, but I wonder if it would be too much to ask for a little news on the AFLW team. They're in pre-season now, and we have some new recruits, including another Irish player. It's just so hard from overseas, or interstate for that matter, to get any sense of how we're preparing under a new coach, and with some changes to the lineup, some through long-term injury. Terence, I haven't got much to offer. I chanced upon the AFLW training before one of the men's sessions a couple of weeks ago. Unfortunately, the club doesn't put anything up about when the girls train, unlike the men, so it's hard to know when to get out there and see what's happening. The only thing I took away from that one training session was our new recruit, Aoife Horick. Aoife, for those of you who don't speak Gaelic, is spelled Aeiofe. So don't use
sale or something.
Yeah, don't use phonetics.
End of financial year Irish sale.
Yeah. She's a very slight girl, but apparently, and on the day, Campbell, the ruck who retired, was doing kicking lessons with her to teach her how to kick an Australian rules football instead of the Irish one. But she's a very slight girl, runs like the wind apparently, is very, very fast. So that's only from what I've heard, but I actually haven't seen it, so I'll have to wait for a bit, and I'll keep my ears and eyes open for any news about the training session. If anyone from the club's listening, please put it up on the website. It's not all that hard. There are people who are interested in AFLW as well as the men's competition.
When does that season start? When does their season start?
I think it's the 9th of August. I think it's the first game for us. There's going to be
some double headers, and I think they're playing more games, which is in at Marvel and on AFL grounds, which is what they should have done from the get-go. They should just stop playing those games at Casey full stop. That's great. Let's keep tracking that. And I know Terence is a huge fan of the AFLW, so am I, so are you, obviously. But he's obviously, not obviously, but Terence has also got a connection to the Irish stuff. He really loves that, and he's across them. Just looking, just quickly, I just pulled up the stats for comparison at the same age for Tom Hawkins and Matthew Jefferson. And, Tom Hawkins has got him covered for disposals and in most things, but not crazy difference. So averaging at the same age, 5.8 contested possessions per game, Jeffo 4.6. Contested marks 1.2 per game for at the same age for Tommy Hawkins, and 0.9 for Jeffo. But the one that I thought was interesting, 1.7 marks inside 50 for Hawkins, 1.2 for Jeffo. So not a million miles off the same sort of stats that Hawkins had. And as I said, Hawkins was in a similar position. He was on the fringe of that Cats team at the same age before coming of age in that grand final, wasn't it, where he hit the post and caused the bloody arc revolution that we've been suffering through ever since. So, so there's, I think that sometimes we can be a bit quick to write off key forwards. So, Jeffo, make sure that you kick forward, and I'm going to make Bitcoin level returns on my shares on you. Oh, actually, I've gone backwards. I'll take that again, gold or something.
Okay. That's where we'll leave it for tonight. Thank you to Binman for sharing their commentary with me this evening. Thank you to our listeners and those who sent in questions. Monocular, Go Lordy, Terence Langley, Pitmaster, Travy14, Wiley D, Buck Naked, Long Suffering No More, Lazy, Bowser Power, and for the comments, unfortunately, which we couldn't include, from Radish D, Spirit of Norm Smith, D-Star, Doug Reamer, and Gordon of the Dig. So again, thanks to Binman, and thanks also to Andy, who will put this program together so that everyone can hear it later on. So we'll miss out on the podcast next week, and we'll have something after the Hawthorn game. But don't forget about Binman's stats program Friday week.
Yeah, so just on that, George, next week I'm going to try and get midweek a review of where we're up to just as a club after round 16. And then I'm going to do the first preview pod with no review in the lead up to the Hawks game. And then you and I and Andy will be, I know it'll just be you and me, won't it, for the post-Hawks game? So
yep.
Post-Hawks, we'll be doing that on probably the Monday night, the post-game, won't it? So,
yep.
But I'll do the preview pod for the Wednesday before, and next Wednesday I'll try and get the pod done for the review of our season thus far in terms of, how we're tracking numbers-wise in particular compared to the top teams, and maybe a bit of a lens on how, other teams who have pushed all the way to the top in the last couple of years and won flags, how we're tracking against those numbers.
Okay, thanks again to everyone, and we'll see you shortly. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.
It's a grand old flag. It's a high-flying flag. It's an emblem for me and for you. Well, it's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue. As we sing a song for you, should old acquaintance be forgot? Keep your eye on the red and the blue. Where the team played fine in the year 39, we're the team that no one can lick. And you'll find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we first sing this song to you. Should old acquaintance be forgotten?